Hello, and thank you for joining us today. This is our fourth webinar of the week in commemoration of International Education Week. My name is Claire Powell, and I'm the Education USA advisor based out of our US Consulate General in Johannesburg. So for those of you that have not been able to join us for previous presentations, a little bit about Education USA before we move along. Education USA is a program that is supported by the US Department of State through its Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. And our main role is to help advise and help students navigate the process of applying to tertiary higher education institutes in the United States. We are there to be accurate, current, and comprehensive with our information, as well as supportive and unbiased as possible. Our motto is to make sure that you find the right fit when you are looking at institutions in the United States, so that it meets three criteria, as I like to say: of course, your academic or your professional goals, your personal goals, and your of course, finally make sure to meet your financial needs. So those three priorities can take quite a lot of significance. But what we will be discussing today is how one really does finance their studies in the United States and kind of what's involved with financing studies in the United States. So hopefully you sit back and relax with us for the next few minutes, if you want to call it, but probably closer to 45 minutes as we go through what to think about when financing one's study in the United States. So a little bit about financing US education. The United States is pretty much one of the only countries where universities awards significant funding to international students. Knowledge and planning are the students' and families' responsibility. I would say, the United States expects families to pay as much as they possibly can, and each school has its own budget and policy for international financial aid. They'll have a policy for domestic students and financial aid and one for international students. So it's important to determine that when investigating and researching universities that best fit you. So a little bit about college and university costs. The bad news is that it can be very expensive. It probably is one of the more expensive education systems in the world. But I think it's important to understand that about 79% of international undergraduate students pay their US education primarily through family funds. The good news, however, is that financial aid exists. Some facts. The comprehensive annual costs range from about $16,000 a year to about $80,000 a year. And when I say comprehensive costs, I mean total cost of attendance. So not just tuition and fees, but also including living costs into that equation. Just over 1,000 institutions award financial aid above $10,000 a year to an international student. If you halve that, or just a little bit over 557 award aid above $20,000 to international students. Again, almost halving it, about 290 award aid above $30,000 a year, and yet still 250 can meet students' full financial need. Some more questions. What assumptions do students and families make about financing their education, US education? I think there is a misconception that, it's full of scholarships out there, and that's not necessarily true. You do have to look for them. Primarily, I would say a vast majority of the financial aid an international student will find will come from if it doesn't come from family, will come directly from the US institution that they apply to, not necessarily an outside one. Especially that's true here in South Africa, because we don't necessarily have government funding for international students to go, South Africans to go abroad, should I say. I think some other questions to ask: do you genuinely need aid, or is it merely something that you want from a prestige point of view? Because there can be quite a difference. And what would you do if there was no financial aid? Would you still be able to go to the United States, or is it something that would prohibit you from going? So some questions to ask yourself and think about as we go through this presentation. A little bit of reality check when it comes to the United States. I would say on an annual, not even annual, sorry, a daily basis, I get emails from students that have not attended a general session or worked with us, saying simply one word emails, I want scholarship. And that it's a little bit difficult to answer that question because there's so much involved in terms of what do you want from a university? What are you looking for? Do you qualify for university? There's so much that's involved with researching and making sure that you are making an educated decision when it comes to tertiary education. Admission with full funding is highly competitive. I think that is very important to know. So the more financial need you have, the more competitive it can be to receive that. So you want to make sure that you're at the top of your game in order to compete for that. Don't apply to any schools that cannot fill your needs. Again, going on our kind of 3 criteria that we speak about: your academic needs, your financial needs, and your personal needs. A university has to be a right fit for you. Just like you don't fit your feet into shoes that are too small for you because they'll give you blisters. You want shoes that will be comfortable and walk with you all the way to reach your final goals. Don't apply for more aid than you genuinely need. It could be a hindrance to you. Of course, you want to make sure that you're covered in the correct way, and also being fair to others. Some cost examples that we'll look at. I just want to be clear, so disclaimers on the following costs that we will go through. These are 2018-2019 costs, so this is just for the academic year that has begun for students in the United States. That began in August, September of 2018. That will run until May or June of 2019. So that, as you know, the academic year in the United States is opposite to what we have here in South Africa. We're going to look at, what the costs include are tuition and fees, room and board. There's an estimated book and personal expenses, so that can be, about roughly $1,500 for books and supplies, and roughly $2,500 for personal expenses. Travel costs are not included necessarily in this equation, especially from an international flight point of view. We just don't have that information to put into it. And medical insurance is also not included into this price, and that will probably range from about $650 a year to about $3,000 a year. So it can be pricey, but unfortunately it's an absolute necessity when it comes to studying in the United States that you have covered. So something to ask: how much can your parents afford, or how much you as a graduate student can you afford to spend per year times 4 years, or how many ever years your degree is? You want to make sure that you ask that question. What can you realistically put together as a family? And then what sources of funding can you obtain? For instance, maybe you're an Alan Gray Orbis scholar for for high school. If you get into certain universities in the United States, they may be willing to pay some funds. Do you have other family members, uncles, aunts, distant relatives that have put aside funding or are able to help with some funding? Is it outright your family? Have you looked at universities that can or have a history of giving to international students? So what sources of funding can you obtain? So just a little bit of a cost estimate look. So public institutions in the United States, there are over 650 of these. So understanding that state institutions have to take care of in-state residents first. So these would be the people whose families, for lack of a better word, would be paying taxes to subsidize these institutions. So they would be in-state residents. So you can see that in most cases, barring the first one, the prices can be significantly more for an in-state resident. I see there's a typo on there with regards to the non-residents for Clinton Community College, but Barton Community College, based in Kansas, is roughly the same price for a resident than it is for a non-resident. Clinton Community College is about $18 $12,614 for a resident. If I'm not mistaken, if you add an extra $5,000 onto that, you'll get the amount for a non-resident. If you look at Black Hills State University, again, about $20,000, just shy of $21,000 a year for state resident, 23 for non-resident. And we start seeing some significant increases as we go along. So University of Wyoming in-state resident, just over $19,000 a year, with quite a significant jump for non-resident to $28,000. Looking at New College of Florida, 20 to about versus $43,000 a year. University of Wisconsin, again, almost doubling in price, $25,000 a year versus 49, almost $50,000 a year. UC Berkeley out in California, 36, almost $37,000 a year versus $65,000 a year, and University of Virginia, $31,500 versus $63,000 a year. So you can see there's quite a significant increase for non-residents when it comes to public institutions. And unfortunately, when it comes to public institutions, often they may not necessarily have financial aid on merit or need-based scholarships for international students. So it's very important to understand those dynamics. Private institutions in the United States, so there's over 2,000 of those. You can see quite a jump in cost per year versus the public institutions. But what I would say about private institutions, that often what would be the case with them is that they would be able to put forward, in more cases than not, some merit and financial need, monies towards international students. So Oral Roberts University in Oklahoma, just over $40,000 a year. Howard University in Washington, D.C., just over $50,000 a year. Eckerd College in Florida, just shy of $60,000. St. Olaf in Minnesota, also just shy of $60,000. Denison University in Ohio, just shy of $65,000. Pomona College in California, $69,000, close to $70,000, as is Harvard University in Massachusetts, and then Northwestern University in Illinois, even higher in price still, with almost $73,000 a year. So you can see that, and remember, this is total cost of attendance. So it's looking at tuition and fees, room and board, and books and supplies, mixed in with some personal expenses. So something just to be aware of. So what are the sources of funding to help mitigate all those costs? So parents, other family members or sponsors, institutional financial aid. This could be need-based aid based on algorithms that are done to determine how much your family can pay for and how much there is a gap, so what the need would be, or merit-based. So merit-based aid would be based on high test scores, good grades, probably leadership skills, maybe talents in the arts, music, or sports, as we go along. Various other reasons for merit. On-campus work. As a international student on a F1 student visa, you are entitled to work a maximum of 20 hours a week when class or school is in session. You would be able to work full-time during breaks, though. You can look at outside scholarships, so agencies or foundations. I have seen this more of a rare case in South Africa, but surely it is possible. Sports scholarships. So if you are a student that is competing on a provincial or national level, you could look at potentially going to universities and playing at a top level at universities, especially if you qualify for what's Division 1 and 2 schools. That we have a separate slide on this, where they would give you scholarships specifically for playing sports for them. Religious organizations sometimes provide funding, so to be aware of that. So the types of funding, not necessarily the sources. So need-based aid, as I said before. So looking at what your actual need is from a family or an individual point of view. Merit-based, so again, high test scores, high marks, potentially other leadership qualities or talent possibilities. There's a hybrid. Some universities will do both the need and merit merge. What they have, they might be limited in their budgets for need and limited in merit. So just to understand that. A little bit of reality check. The more you need, the greater the competition. Many full need schools or universities admit less than 5% of the applicants that apply there. Okay. Another reality check, need-based aid goes to the students with the greatest merit. You need to be at top of your game in order to go to these universities that meet that criteria. Some finer details. So there is such a thing as need-blind admissions, and often with these universities, your full need would be met. So when they are making a decision into admitting an individual into a university, they are not going to make a decision, your financial aid or your financial need as determined through an algorithm is not going to be a factor that would deter them from admitting you. However, there are some universities that are a little bit need sensitive, which means is that, maybe they do have large endowments. However, they need to budget that correctly. And when they're admitting students, they do take into consideration the financial situation in order to admit them into the university, which can be a little bit tricky and even more so competitive. Need-based aid as well, with the need sensitive and need blind, often, those ones that will meet full need if you get into the university. But there are other universities that will still give you need-based money, but there's only a maximum amount they can give it. So they might not meet 100%, they might meet 80% or 90% of your need, just because their budgets don't allow for further. Others will just give a standard flat amount, earmark countries. So if they're wanting to see, say, more South Africans or more civil engineering majors over computer engineering majors, or they're really wanting to see an uptake in the arts, or perhaps they are looking at a harp player or an oboe player because their orchestra is losing one of those, then it's important for them to understand that there might be some earmarked aid for certain categories of people, if you want to call it. Merit-based aid, as we've discussed multiple times, that's based on your individual merits in terms of accomplishments in academics, arts, and sports, other achievements, leadership, so on and so forth. And then, of course, sports-based rounds out quite a few differences in that, which we will talk about. Financial aid forms. So often you apply for admissions on an application, so admissions application, but financial aid forms are often separate from the admissions applications. Not always, so they can vary by institution, but in most cases, financial aid forms are going to be separate from admission forms. Requires information on the family income, assets such as house, savings, and investments, annual taxes, and how many family members are in university or in the household, or so on and so forth. Often you can consult websites of the universities for their net price calculator. This indicates how much a student or a family is expected to pay. It considers grades, marks, test scores, activities, and financial circumstances. Please remember that this is an estimate and it's not official. It may not be what you get when decisions come out. So just please use it as a benchmark or guideline, not as an exact truth or science. So how are financial aid packages determined by the universities? It really does depend on each school or higher education institute's budget and their policy. It starts with calculation of a student's contribution, so family funds, locally raised funds, self-help, or on-campus work. So there's an analysis or formula for determining the expected family contribution, so the EFC. Need-based aid tops up the EFC, basically. There's subjective factors that come into play. So limited grant funding is available to the highest achieving international applicants based on their need. So just understanding those dynamics sometimes is that some institutions are working with limited means for internationals. So there's two ways of applying for aid. There's a paper-based form, so the International Student Financial Aid application, but they've also, the College Board has also put, they've got an online application called the CSS Profile, which asks for much of the same information as the ISFA. Some general resources, you can visit www.educationusa.state.gov. We do put some financial aid updates on there. You can follow our Global Education USA Facebook page, so, at Education USA or at Education USA in SA. For a local South African context, we do submit or post institutions' financial aid news on our sites. There is a International Student Handbook, the ISH, or you can go online to bigfuture.collegeboard.org. The same information is indicated there, and you will see that there will be tabs that indicate financial aid policies for domestic and international students. Another good place to go to is College Navigator. That will also give you some, understanding of what the cost will be. We also at Education USA have a financial aid table that we, would be willing for those students who come into us to see. It is something that we can't distribute, but it's something that if you were to come into office, you could use to research. And then also, of course, the International Student Financial Aid application. What I would say is check out our YouTube channel. Both on a global site and and this site where this presentation is, because we've done a presentation on filling out the actual financial aid application forms. So those are general resources. So understanding scholarships and grants outright. So individual colleges and universities may give awards. So what I like to show this as is free money. So pictures, I don't know, a GIF or, an animation of someone basically standing there swiping money off their hands. It's free money. So this could be on academic merit. It could be on sports talent, musical arts and drama talent, leadership skills, and financial need. Student athletes, some other options that are available. So if you go to College Coaches Online or to the NCAA's website, you can get a little bit more of information. So NCAA is the largest collegiate sports association, and they break levels into 3 categories. So Division 1, these tend to be big schools, so state schools in most cases. They tend to be most competitive sports programs and a high quota of sports scholarships available. Division 2 tend to be smaller public schools, many private schools, more limited quota of sports scholarships. Division 3 are mostly smaller private schools. They are the biggest division, and they don't have any financial aid related to athletic ability. It probably have different policies for merit and need, but it wouldn't be for sports ability. There's another national association for sports, so the Intercollegiate Athletics, that you can check out. These are schools that are also looking to provide scholarships for students competing. One could look at loans, but given the current exchange rate here in South Africa, I always say, trade with caution. Big red lights should go off, and you should research this heavily before you make this decision, especially with interest rates. You could approach South African institutions or banks. Individual colleges and universities have their own loans that you can apply for. If you were to apply for commercial US loans, you could look at Global Student Loan Corporation or International Student Loan or Access Group. And you can see the websites listed there. Some of these, however, may require a US citizen or permanent resident co-signer. Do your homework, shop around, put together an Excel matrix or sheet on, what loans are available, what are their interest rate, what are their payback terms. This really deserves a lot of attention and really should have a once, twice, third time look over and really be a last resort. Not mean to click on the link there. taking us back to the presentation. On-campus jobs, as we spoke a little bit about earlier, usually pay minimum wage of about $7.25 an hour. That is the federal minimum wage. There are other states or some universities that may have their own minimum wage that they have. So like the state of California may give you $15 an hour. I know the likes of Yale gives $12 to $13 an hour for work. But if you're looking at the bare minimum of the $7.25 an hour, on average, you could earn about $145 a week working the 20 hours you're entitled to, which is roughly $3,000 in an academic year. So as you can see, this by no means is this going to cover tuition, but it will cover personal expenses and allow you to have options and go out and enjoy your time with your friends. Typical work for on campus is cafeteria, bookstore, library, gym, and administrative work. In your second year as an undergraduate student, you could apply to be a resident assistant. Usually you would get free room and board, or maybe a free room and a small stipend or a meal plan. So just to understand, that can almost halve your costs, which is quite significant. So if you've got strong academic standing and are involved quite significantly on your campus, this could be definitely an option to think about for your second year. Employment off campus is only allowed after successful completion of first year of studies, unless you can prove absolute dire economic need. You do need to apply and receive permission from your institution, the university, and the Bureau of Citizenship and Immigration Services. Okay, this is not guaranteed, and you would be limited to 20 hours a week. Another option to think about when reducing your costs of attending university, 2 years associate's degree is something that you could look at, because many times, community colleges have lower costs. They have guaranteed transfer opportunities to four-year institutions. So you'd have the 2+2 option. You're not starting again. Often few require standardized tests for admission. There are rolling deadlines for admission as well, so not necessarily strict deadlines. Vocational and career-oriented. No housing or meal plans offered, though. That would probably be one thing to be aware of. You could probably find relatively affordable housing nearby, and would have to be on your own in terms of meals. A good place to research community colleges, especially ones that are friendly to international students, is the American Association of Community Colleges, and you can click on the link there, or type that into your search browser and go have a look. There are even a couple now that are offering full tuition scholarships to international students, which reduces cost even further, which I think is amazing. For our graduate and professional students, there's some other options to consider. Fellowships, so these are positions that grant financial aid to a graduate student while allowing for study in a specific field. Assistantships would tend to be offered directly by the institution. So these are positions that grant financial assistance to graduate students while in exchange for teaching duties or research duties. So things to consider include work and or tax requirements, the benefits that are afforded to you as a graduate student, and the length of time the assistance is available. How to improve your chances of getting financial aid. Go the extra mile. More research means more enhanced applications. Optional components, only if you don't want to get in. Basically what that means is if part of the application says this is optional, really you should be doing it, because you're giving them more information that could enhance your application and for you to get in. Don't accept, is this good enough? Rather, ask yourself, what else can I do to strengthen my application? What's going to make everything tie in together and show my worth? So demonstrate your worth before need. Websites are just an example of the Big Future, the College Board website. And as you can see there on the left-hand side of the screen, you've got tabs for transfer students and for international students, and can give you a breakdown of the costs that are involved. Points to consider. Search institutions early. Create a calendar of deadlines, especially if you're applying for early decisions. Conduct online scholarship searches. Create your own scholarship database for scholarships that do pertain to you, because there's a lot of databases out there, but you have to weed out the ones that don't pertain to you. Check often as new items are added. Contact your top choice universities. Be realistic and plan for the program and not just the 1 year. Think about options to bolster your academic preparation and the affordability. I'm not sure if we have any questions. I'm going to have a look to see if I see any questions that have come up. I'm not seeing anything necessarily. Okay. If you do have any questions, I highly suggest that you reach out to us on our Facebook page. Our handle is @EducationUSA in SA. Send us a direct message for more information, and hopefully one of our advisors will get back to you shortly. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. And remember, preparation is key. Research early, bolster your applications, and anything is possible. Thank you. Have a great day.